Good morning and welcome to TVP World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. On this episode of World Talks, we focus on the dramatic collapse of Bashar al-Assad's brutal regime in Syria. Now, Assad's overthrow has been welcomed by many world leaders. Commentators say the Islamist rebel uprising also represents a brutal, shaming blow to Russia, which has backed Assad's government for years. Now, they warn that Russia's failure to support Assad should be a lesson to countries relying on Moscow's mercenaries in Africa. Now, joining me now to discuss the latest developments quickly unfolding in Syria is Ronald Meinardus, Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
All right, Ronald, the situation in Syria is developing quite rapidly, but let's start with the most recent developments as of late last night into this morning. Now, the Israeli military has carried out large-scale attacks across Syria. They targeted the airports, strategic military infrastructure, including in Damascus. Now we also have Syria's prime minister says that he has agreed to hand power to the opposition Salvation government headed by Mohammed al-Bashir. Now, please explain to us, given this rapidly evolving situation, how do you see this crisis unfolding in the short and long term? I mean, what are the key factors that are going to possibly determine the future stability of the region?
So we have to make a clear distinction between what is happening domestically among the Syrian forces, and there are some impressively encouraging signs there. You mentioned some of them. And apart from that, you have to also see the external dimension of the evolving situation. Syria has always been a victim of external interventions and mingling. And while on the Syrian front, the military actions have more or less come to a halt, we have seen quite dramatic military interventions from outside forces. You mentioned the various Israeli attacks, numerous attacks throughout the country, not only a reoccupation of part of the buffer zone, but we have also seen fighting continuing in the northeast with proxy armies and militias of Turkey fighting against Kurdish forces. This, in my eyes, is the most serious security threat at this moment. And then also some United States forces also stationed in the north of Syria have attacked ISIS or Islamic State operators there. So there is still a lot of military action going on, and it is mainly spearheaded by external forces.
Do you think that we could possibly see a fragmented state with multiple power centers for the future of Syria, or would there be a possibility for a unified government, or do you think that it's all just too early to tell at this stage right now?
I mean, there seems to be a consensus among the various forces for the territorial integrity of Syria. Now, be it as it is, Syria is a country which is ethnically and religiously a divided country with very various religious groups and ethnic groups. And coming from Europe, we have also these situations, and the European concept to solve these issues is a sort of federalism. And now the question is whether the Syrian forces can agree to some sort of a federal solution, which always implies also the division of power. And Iraq which is just the neighboring country, as we can see in the map, which it's just presented, is an example maybe not to follow, because after the fall from power of Saddam Hussein, there was a similar situation, and then, as we all know, this country has fallen into a horrific crisis and a continuation of civil strife. So we can only hope that this will not be repeated. The signs we see from the incoming regime, from the incoming power holders, was swept to Damascus in less than 2 weeks, are positive. This is what I hear from all observers. This is what I hear from Western and other governments. And the things to watch very carefully is how the new regime in Damascus deals with minorities, whether there are attacks of revenge against elements of the old regime. And
well, Ronald,
mainly,
let me interrupt you here. I mean, I personally saw videos on social media yesterday of rebels also taking a woman, possibly kidnapping. However, there have been reports that they said that they won't inflict any restrictions upon them. I mean, we're already seeing that. And also, I mean, you mentioned about minorities here. We know that yesterday, I mean, Turkey hosts some 3 million migrants, and we saw them lining up at the border trying to get back into Syria. What can you tell us about that?
correct. I mean, there are many. There are millions and millions, not only the 3 millions of Syrians who found refuge in Turkey, but there are also more than 1 million Syrians in Germany and in other European countries. And there's a big debate now what to do with these people. I think it's a premature debate. What we see that many Syrians are keen on returning to their country. What is certainly the case that to rebuild Syria, it will be very important that these individuals who are specialists, who are doctors, who are engineers, who are architects will return. So this is a matter of weeks and months ahead, how they will react. Many are keen on doing so. Others, of course, are very hesitant because they do not know what is awaiting them. So therefore, it's very important for the regime there to make sure that they're not persecuted and they have the conditions to work there. And this is the role for the outside powers. And to what extent it is useful now to intervene military is a whole different question. The government seems to be trying to stabilize the situation, and we can only support them at this stage.
Let's talk about Assad for a moment here. Now, from what we know with the latest reports here, Assad is in Moscow. He's keeping quite a low profile. There's also not much that's being said in Russian media. There's no video footage of him and his family since they arrived. And the Kremlin is saying that there are no plans for Putin to actually meet him, and that his staff members at the Syrian embassy have confirmed his arrival to Moscow, but that he's also waiting to see what's going to happen next by the diplomatic mission. Now, what now, Ronald, is the most important question in Syria that's left hanging for Russia, particularly with the Russian air base and naval base?
I mean, so I think there's a lot of disagreement on many things in Syria, but I think there is agreement amongst all observers and analysts that the two main losers in what is happening these days and what has happened the last couple of days is Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and of course the Russian Federation, because they were the main supporters of Assad. And they couldn't manage to hold on to the regime. They tried to protect him until the very last moment, but they failed because they didn't have the capacities to do so. And dramatic is the loss of the Russians. And they are hoping now to hold on to the bases you mentioned. And there are indications. There's the news report that coming from Moscow that there seems to be some agreement on the incoming Syrian government that they would concede these bases. This is premature to say so because not only has Russia been supporting Assad, but Russia has over the years been responsible for bombing territories and territories which were occupied by the rebels and the Islamists. And there's a lot of bad feeling against Russia. And I would be very surprised if a unified government would agree to a continuation of Russian bases in Syria.
I mean, in a way of what's happening in Georgia now with those daily protests of really these Georgians being out there protesting against Russia's influence, you know, and many say that Russia is losing the South Caucasus. Now, can you say, would you say that Russia may be now possibly losing the Middle East?
There are indications that the Russians' position through the failure to stabilize Assad is dramatically weakened because Syria has an incredible strategic importance at the very heart of the Middle East. So to lose a foothold there is extremely dramatic. And I would even say it is more dramatic than the loss of the Western and the US influence in Afghanistan some while ago. And the way the West and the United States lost control in Afghanistan we see, if you want, a repetition in Syria these days, although the Russians have not left their bases there. What we read is that they have moved away some of their military personnel. Some of them has gone to Ukraine to fight another war there. The navy has been taken out of Tarsus, but then the Russians also have access to Libyan ports, and it is said that some of the ships might go to Algeria. But with Syria lost, one can be sure that the influence of the Russians in this region has been dramatically reduced. Yes, that's why I insist that this is the main loser, together with Iran, which has to rethink how it will.
Roland, let me ask you this as a brief, because we're almost out of time here. Now, Poland's foreign minister, Sikorski, said that Russia's loss of key military bases in Syria is actually going to affect Moscow's ability to influence further African politics. But my question to you, sir, is how do you see, with Assad's regime crumbling, how is this going to affect or may affect European security, and particularly Poland? If you can just give us under a minute, just in context there.
I don't know whether it is necessarily beneficial for European security, because now Russia has, if you may want, the leeway to focus more on its aggressive war in Ukraine and possibly in other European countries. So we have to wait and see. But as an international player, and the whole thing also is an international diplomatic fight going on, Russia is severely weakened, and this will be seen in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you so much, Ronald Meinardus from the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy, for breaking down to us the unfolding situation in Syria. Thanks for being with us here this morning.
Thank you, too.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skye, but don't go away. Very soon, another interview.